Hey, what's up, everybody? For another episode of Star Chasers Girls Talk Ball with my lovely co-host Mickey, aka Cravin Cowboys, but also with our special guest today from DallasCowboys.com, Nick Harris. Nick, how you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I appreciate y'all having me on. How are y'all?
Doing great. Really appreciate you coming on and blessing us with your presence. Mickey, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Just got off a couple flights. Finally landed actually out here in Oxnard for training camp, and I'm just really excited to get it going. Like Star said, we really excited. We said last week we're having a special guest, but we didn't want to tell y'all because we knew we were gonna have somebody huge on here. So thank you guys for joining us. Thank you to Mr. Nick Harris for for spending this time with us. We know it's busy. We know he's giving us countless clips of things going on in camp, and we've been thriving on. We've been like me and Star talked about us wanting Cowboys news like the whole off season. Now football's finally back. We're here. We're back talking real Cowboys football, talking training camp, and have an amazing beat writer who we all look to for clips, for stories, for news headlines, just for everything really related to Cowboys. So we were really happy to have you here. We're really happy to have you here.
Yeah, I appreciate y'all having me for sure.
Appreciate that so much, Nick. But y'all know what to do before we get into it. First of all, shout out to everybody in the chat. Nisi, Jameson, what's up, guys? Really appreciate you. We know more people are coming in, but just super excited. But y'all know when y'all come in here, like the video, right? Like the video, share the video. Please subscribe to Mickey and I's YouTube channel. I'm trying to get to 300 subscribers for the season kicks off. Mickey, I don't know Mickey too. We both trying to reach 300. So y'all help us out by subscribing. We're doing our best to not only give you guys like our takes and opinions and things like that, but also bring on special guests that can give us special insight to the team because they work with the team. They're with the team every day. You know what I'm saying? Right. So we are just guys that we see our team from the outside, but we get all of our news, from people like Nick Harris who can help us just better understand the team and what's going on. So, but before we get into the football stuff, Nick, I wanted to ask you, how did you get into covering the Dallas Cowboys? Like, were you a Cowboys fan, or did somebody how did you get into covering us? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, it's a weird journey. It's a I wouldn't say long, but it's a weird, unique journey. I kind of go back to 2018. I was a first generation college student and just trying to make some ends meet. And for me, I wanted to find something that I can make money doing. That would, help accelerate a sports journalism career because that's something that I had a lot of passion for at the time. So I started covering college football recruiting for the pennies on the dollar. But hey, for me, that was $1 million at the time. And I just kind of took that into a role at 247sports.com, more so in a covering, but also a scouting role, just trying to stay on top of college football recruits. Throughout the state of Texas. That eventually evolved into a national role with Rivals covering Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, all those surrounding states.
Wow. All those.
It's been a lot of days on the road, a lot of nights on the road at that job. I was blessed enough to work in that industry for 5 years, and it ended up leading me into great heights, and it allowed me to do so many good things. And I was really good friends with Kyle Yeomans from kind of that realm as well, just because he calls a lot of high school football. So we ran into each other quite a bit. So whenever there was a beat writing position open at DallasCowboys.com, it wasn't even really on my radar, but Kyle had sent it to me and he was like, hey, I think you should apply for this. I think you'd be really good at it. And I was initially, honestly, I was like, I don't know. I love where I'm at right now. And I was like, I respect Kyle. I love him. So I'm gonna take this interview. I took the interview and I fell in love with it, and I'm blessed enough to be in this position today. And about a year and a half in, and I'm loving every day.
Well, that's awesome, and just to know like your background, like how, like you said, like you did a lot of like scouting and stuff for the high school kids, so you kind of know what you're looking for when you're looking and evaluating players. You, like you said, you have like 5 years of experience with that. So that's good to know just about, you know, your background. And so just I wanted to ask like a ice-breaking question, like what do you love the most about your job, like working for the Dallas Cowboys?
Man, I would say the free food. We do get a lot of it. I'll say that as a foodie.
I didn't expect that
one. I do love the road trips. Like the road trips are fun. You know, being able to travel with the team and, you know, stay in those same hotels and travel on the bus with them and you kind of see their mentality from getting on the bus at the hotel to getting off the bus at the stadium and having their headphones on and walking into the stadium. Like that energy radiates and you feel that, you know, and you know going into that building that they're going to win that game, or you know going into that building that they're going to lose that game. You still feel that energy.
Wow.
It's I would say that's pretty cool.
Okay, awesome. Okay, and so, you know, if I ask you what's your favorite thing, what's your least favorite thing about your job? Now, don't say anything to get fired, but
yeah, right. I
think about
I would say like when I first got into this industry, wanting to be in sports journalism, I want to report as fairly and as accurately as possible, and you know I try to be very intentional about that every single day. But at the end of the day, my employer is the Dallas Cowboys, you know, so finding that line, finding that balance, it's never perfect. And it's always evolving, and you kind of have to work with it as time goes on. There are going to be people that never take you seriously just as a result of, you know, my paycheck has the star on it, you know, so I battle with that a little bit sometimes, but if it's tough to say least favorite because it's a blessing at the end of the day. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
well,
just to kind of piggyback off your question about the players, you kind of mentioned the aura of going into a game. Do you, you know, doing beat writing, do you ever develop kind of relationship with any of the players, like personal relationships? I know you know, you're around them a lot and you work with them, you ask them questions and things like that. But do you ever develop any kind of personal relationships, or just, you know, maybe even friendships with some of the players?
Yeah, there are a couple of them that, you know, whenever that they have a podcast or something, or if they have something that, you know, they want to promote, I think we have a close enough relationship where they can send it to me and be like, hey, do you mind just kind of retweeting this podcast? Or, you know, hey, my brother is doing this. Do you kind of have some advice for him in the journalism industry? You know, little things like that. But I also try to stay as professional as possible when it comes to the players, because we are around them all the time. And, you know, when we're in the lunchroom every day, they're kind of walking past us getting their lunch too. And I try to just keep it to, hey, what's up, man? How you doing? Doing good. All right, see you, man. And we just kind of keep it on. But when they get into the conversation, I'll let them. But at the end of the day, you know, they have a job to do, as do I. And so I just try to keep it as professional as possible in that sense. But for sure, there are a couple of guys that I feel like if I really needed something, I could lean on for them to help me out.
You want to name drop one of them or no?
Probably not. Probably not.
Okay. I tried, guys. I did the best I could.
Right.
Okay. But okay, so well, let's move into some football now, you know, because we brought you here to talk about some football and ask some football questions that, you know, we've really been wanting to know. And so I'll start off with the running game. We know that last year the running game, for lack of better words, just wasn't really good. And, you know, when we go back and look at the film, it seems like some of it was on the running backs for sure, you know, as far as vision and stuff like that. But some was also just the scheme just wasn't too great. I say that, you know, we kind of transitioned from Kellen Moore, who ran more of a zone, outside zone type of scheme, to going with Mike Solari, and Brian Schottenheimer, who like to run more power gap schemes and stuff like that. And it just seemed like maybe personnel wise, we didn't exactly have what we need, but it seems like this year, you know, based on the picking up guys like Cooper Beebe, Guyton, you know, then you have Brock Hoffman, who's obviously stepped into that leadership role, you know, really for these young guys and stuff like that, with guys that have just a little bit more power in that interior that can down block. But we noticed that a lot of issues came from just really, it seemed like I remember there was a game, like either it was last year or 2 years ago versus the Lions when I can't remember his name, but he was a cornerback and he had like I don't know how many tackles on our running backs in the run game, and we could see that that was still an issue. It was like guys were just unaccounted for. So basically, I want to say, as have you seen any nuances or changes in the run game / scheme? And also, we did hire a guy named Steve Shimko from Boston College, who we know last year Boston College had a pretty good run game. I think they were running like 300 yards a game, something crazy like that. So, and we brought that guy here. So, basically asking like, have you seen changes in the scheme? Have you talked to Steve Shimko, and has he had any part in helping with the run game, as you know?
I'll start with the first question, and I think you made a really good point about the transition from Kellen Moore into the Brian Schottenheimer, Mike McCarthy, even Mike Solari as well, kind of the system that they brought in last year. And you had a guy like Tony Pollard who probably benefited more from being in a Kellen Moore type of system. And then you factor in also him coming off of that injury and him having to kind of account for the beginning half of the season, just getting his legs back under him in a good sense, in a healthy sense. And eventually, I think whenever he did find his stride, the offense had kind of evolved past him by that point, and it kind of felt like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Not to say that Tony Pollard is not a talented back, because I think he is. I think he could be a really interesting back in the Titans system if they use him correctly. But I think now they have these more downhill guys with Ezekiel Elliott that they bring in, with Royce Freeman that they bring in. They're gonna be solid in the red zone, but it's between the 20s that like I have no idea where they're going to find production from. And I was talking about that with somebody just about an hour ago. It's just I don't have a ton of confidence in the run game right now, because you need the guy that can take a 20 carry game and be able to win you the time of possession battles against teams like Baltimore, Cleveland, Philadelphia, Francisco. And I just don't feel like you have that right now. As far as schematic changes, I would say it's maybe a little too early for me to identify those things. I try to identify those, like, honestly, week 4 of the season is when I start really starting to pick up on those things, just because they're trying so many different things right now. And they're still in the install phase. Today was the last day of them installing everything that they have still on the offense. And they're going to teeter with some things. They're going to play with some things. Some things they'll use, some things they won't. As far as what I've seen so far, at least from the running game, though, they are letting every single running back have as many reps possible, and they are running right down the throat. So, I mean, it's very similar to what we saw last year. In other ways. As far as differences, though, and maybe even how Steve Shimko has helped alleviate those differences and bring some of his knowledge, I don't have a ton of knowledge to that point yet. But I think in Shimko's case, it's interesting because I have seen him working with just about every group in the offense, every position group. He's worked with on release packages. He's worked with the running backs on between the tackles, where he's worked with the offensive line on gap schemes and things of that nature. So I think he's going to be an interesting kind of guy that I think will be able to just kind of bounce knowledge off the rest of the assistant coaches. But as far as how much responsibility is actually on his plate at the end of the day, I think that's going to kind of evolve over time, and once they get comfortable with this new system.
Just to kind of bounce off that question, Star, you asked about Shimko. We saw them hiring Paul Gunther, right? Because he worked with Zimmer for a lot of years. Do you kind of see Shimko kind of being that way on the offensive side? Like we see Paul Gunther helping out with the linebackers as far as helping them trying to stop the run. Do you see Shimko, like you just mentioned, instead of just working with the running backs, talking with different position groups, do you think his effect could really stretch that far?
Yeah, I think I like that comparison. I think Gunther gives a little bit more as far as responsibility goes, and as far as like what he says actually being put forth on the field, because Shimko doesn't have a ton of NFL experience, whereas Gunther's been in this league for quite a while. He has a lot of experience working with Mike Zimmer too, so those two trust each other, and they kind of have that rapport to be able to kind of work together on certain run game things. I think Gunther has a little bit more influence on the defensive side of the ball, but I see the comparison there. I like that comparison for sure.
Okay, awesome. So you said that they're giving these running backs every chance they can get, because I guess they're trying to see who's gonna steal the show.
Right.
So, but one guy that I want to know more about now, from the film, from the about 2 or 3 clips we got of him, my guy Deuce. Deuce was Deuce was my number 1 running back out of the draft. I mean, that's what I saw on film. The only reason why I was gonna put him behind Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan was because obviously Deuce is 5'5". You know what I'm saying? And many people just don't. There's some people that call him little legs and all this stuff. Many people just don't really, I would say, believe or just don't know if Deuce's body type or frame is just right for the NFL. Like, can we really use this guy as a running back? But I'm like, hey, in college, he was a bell cow for K-State. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that he's going to be that in the NFL because college NFL is different. But what has Deuce gotten run, I guess, with the ones, or has he been mostly like with the 2s and 3s? And how is he looking out there? Is he actually running? I did hear that they are trying him at a wide receiver too.
Yeah.
Like, I guess they're trying to see if he can get like a dual role. So what are you seeing from my guy Deuce out there?
I'll say right up front, every running back has had at least one rep with the ones. But Deuce Vaughn mainly has been sticking with that second and third team unit, working with Cooper Rush, working with Trey Lance. And I think that's more so just because when the preseason comes around, I think he's going to get a lot of burn. I think he's going to get a lot of burn in these 3 games, not only in the running game, but also in the return game. And you mentioned the receiving game. They're trying to motion him out on the outside, get him some love in the slot. The one thing that I hate about it, though, excuse me, is the first pass attempt that Cooper Rush tried to make to Deuce Vaughn, I believe it was in yesterday's practice, was a
interception by
Thomas. So
me and Star were just talking about that yesterday.
I hope that wasn't a Deuce problem, but nevertheless, I think they're going to continue trusting Deuce to go out there in the slot and maybe work some things. With a guy like Deuce, you saw the big play-making ability at Kansas State.
Yeah.
You saw his ability to shed tacklers even. The contact balance at 5'5" is mind-blowing. His shiftiness is world-class. You just got to get him the ball. And I think just getting him the ball in space will allow him to be able to do what he does best. But I think he's going to have to build that confidence back up because it's been a year since he's made those big plays. And the one big play that I can remember off the top of my head that he made during the preseason last year was, I believe, in that Seattle game where he came up the middle and he shed a linebacker, he spun off of him, was able to get into the end zone. I was like, yes, if he can be that for the Dallas Cowboys team this year, and he doesn't have to be an RB1, he doesn't even have to be an RB2, but if he can be a guy that can come in and be that big play gadget type
that
play,
spark,
absolutely, it could be a spark for this offense. And so Deuce Vaughn's a guy I have my eyes very closely peeled on as preseason starts to get warmed up and these games start to pass by. I'm rooting for the kid. I feel like anybody would. Such a good dude. Obviously a great story, and I would love to see him pan out. But I would have to think with the way that running back room is set up and the competition that is in front of everybody in that room right now, if he doesn't take advantage of this opportunity, I don't feel like he'll have a better one.
I kind of have a follow-up to that, kind of dealing with Hunter Lipke a little bit. Like last year we saw them, it just seemed like they kind of had more plays kind of tailored to Hunter Lipke. It seemed like McCarthy was using him a little bit more. We saw him, a lot of usage late in the season, the Miami game. I'm just wondering do you think maybe Hunter has a leg up over Deuce? I don't know if I saw them use use Deuce as much as they used Lipke last year.
Yeah, Hunter Lipke's an interesting case. Whenever I look at the running back room and I factor all those names in, I kind of put Hunter Lipke off on an island by himself just because he does so much work at fullback. Like he's that lead blocker. He was really good in some lead blocking opportunities and being able to create holes for Tony Pollard last year. And I think what they want to do with him is put a little bit more size on him, allow him to continue doing that between the tackles and pave some lanes for whoever is behind him running the ball. But as far as his integration as a true running back and taking handoffs, you mentioned that handoff against Miami, which I think kind of killed the coaching staff's confidence for the rest of the season. But I only hear praise when I ask about Hunter Lipke, and he takes his reps. And he makes sure to get him. This is kind of a funny story. They have Ambar Garcia talked about this on the break a couple of days ago, but they have a jugs machine out there that they work on after practice every single day, just catching balls, about 15 to 20 that they each get before they rotate out. And Zeke was right behind Hunter Lipke in line. And I guess Zeke thought that Hunter maybe was done, and so he took a couple steps forward, and Hunter was like, "No, I got a few more."
He counting his reps. He said,
"Okay, right."
he said he
like, "Hey, I've been here longer than you. I don't know who you are."
Right. I know that's right.
Okay, okay, so
I got this.
that's interesting. And, I like the point that you pointed out about how, these guys, yeah, they can get reps with the ones, but you really need to get comfortable if you're trying to compete and get a spot on this roster, right? Or a starting job. We're not putting Dak out there. You know what I'm saying? Unless Mike just changes his philosophy and we play Dak maybe like the last preseason game for like a drive or something like that. But for the most part, Dak's not going to be out there. It's going to mainly be the Trey Lance show with probably sprinkles of Cooper Rush. So those are the quarterbacks that you need to get more comfortable with, because those are the guys are going to be throwing you the ball to make the team. So I think that's a very important point that you pointed out as we continue to talk. But I wanted to know, now we heard the other day Steven say rant and rave about Royce Freeman. And then I think today Mike McCarthy was ranting and raving about Royce Freeman. And I'm not gonna lie, like when we got Royce Freeman, I said can't buy it. You know what I'm saying? Like he's not making the roster. But if I'm hearing, our COO and I'm hearing our head coach, and it's seeming like, okay, maybe Royce is more so going to be a lock on this roster rather than a camp body. So what are you seeing from Royce Freeman? Do you think that he's got a strong chance to make this roster? Or basically, are you buying into the hype?
I wouldn't necessarily say hype, but the thing about that running back room is there's a lot of experience there between him and Ezekiel Elliott. And even Rico Dowdle, while he doesn't necessarily have the degrees that those two guys have, he's been in the league going into his 5th season. So I think in a room with those kind of guys, Royce has a ton of experience, and he has a ton of experience going back to Oregon. Even as a high school running back, he carried a big load for his high school team. So, I mean, he's been playing this position at a high level for a long time. And I think just having that knowledge, not only as a guy that can get downhill, Mike McCarthy praised his pass protecting. I think that's going to be the way that he ends up finding a lock on this roster because, I mean, yes, you have Ezekiel Elliott that can be that pass protector, but who's going to come in when Ezekiel Elliott maybe needs to carry the ball on 1st and 2nd down, needs a breather on 3rd, then you can rotate in Royce Freeman to be that pass protector. So I think there's an interesting way for Royce Freeman to make this roster, but again, I don't feel super comfortable about him being this bell cow running back or a guy that can get you yards between the 20s. Right. More of a guy that I wouldn't want to see handed the ball off on a consistent basis unless it's red zone.
Okay, so you're thinking more so he'll be more, because they did talk about him too, his role on special teams. I think Mike McCarthy also, so he's more of a guy that can come in, give, like you said, give Zeke some rest or something like that. But he probably really is going to make his, claim to fame on special teams, and mostly coming in and maybe giving us some help in the pass blocking arena, basically, is what you're saying, and how you see him right now. Okay, that makes sense. So final question for the running backs. Who would you say stock is highest or up in the running back room right now? Stock's low. Very low for them in the running back room.
That's a tough one, just because it's been tough to kind of gauge who's been up and down as far as pads have come on, only 2 days of pads. So I won't necessarily give you a guy that's down, because really I don't have one. I think they're all right here. But I will say a guy that maybe has surprised me a little bit more. I'm not buying stock or anything yet, but a guy that is starting to catch my eye is Nathaniel Pete, the undrafted free agent out of Missouri. He's had a couple of big plays where he's been able to get in between the tackles and squeak out and make something happen of it. It's funny where he squeaks out of the offensive line. You kind of see a small figure and you're like, is that Deuce? And you're like, no, it's Nathaniel. 5'8", 5'9". He's got a little bit of a height on him, but he's been a guy that's caught my eye on a couple of plays. Nothing too crazy, but I think all in all, these running backs just need to stack days, and they need to preseason
days and games. So you think, and that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking a lot of these guys, because it seems like we're just moving a lot of pieces and we're interchanging a lot of pieces. But I feel like the coaches, do you feel like the coaches are going to be able to really start to pencil in, all right, he's in, all this stuff once these preseason games start to come into play? Yeah. And then they'll start narrowing it down.
For sure, and I think it's going to go right all the way up until that final preseason game, just like it did last year with the running back room. Trying to figure out what worked behind Tony Pollard. I I mean, Hunter Lipke earned his spot in the very final preseason game last year, and Mike
That's
McCarthy
right.
didn't have a game
That's
like
right.
that. He wouldn't have stuck around. So I think it's going to be a very similar situation this year. It could be, who knows? It could be a guy like Snoop Connor having a big game, or a guy like Malik Davis. I mean, he's a guy that
Snoop Connor.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Wow.
Malik Davis is a guy I have a close eye on too. I mean, he's a guy that if you're looking for a complement to the bigger bell cow type running back that Ezekiel Elliott and Royce Freeman brings. I mean, look at Malik Davis. I mean, he was a guy that kind of waited behind Tony Pollard just because Tony Pollard was talented, but that doesn't mean that Malik Davis doesn't have playmaking ability in his own right. So I'm very curious to see Davis get his reps in the preseason too. I mean, there's a lot of guys. One of them are going to have to make a play, you would have to think, but the big playmaking ability, I think that's going to be what I try to find the most out of that running back room because I can't find it right now.
Okay, so that's a good thing. We're looking for the big play, the spark plug. Do you think if, say, no spark plug get the preseason, now God forbid, but just say hypothetically it happened and all these running backs, we was like, oh, do you think the Cowboys are going to go out and potentially make a trade or, sign, maybe one of these teams cut a running back like the Jets? The Jets have been hogging running back. So maybe the Jets cut a running back or something like that and we sign him. Do you think that that's what they'll likely do?
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, as Stephen Jones says, personnel is a 365-day-a-year job. Acquisition is 365 days a year. So I'm just going to have to fall back to that rhetoric. I think if they're not comfortable or if anybody is not comfortable with what they can get out of that running back room, I think they have an established guy that can be that short yardage back and that can be that pass protector. They have that in Ezekiel Elliott, and if they don't feel like they have that there, then they have it in Royce Freeman. But they need that big playmaking guy, like I said. And if they don't feel like they have that going into the season, it would not surprise me if they go out and make a move to be able to get it and make it happen. Because the last time we saw a big skill position try to be a committee type effort, it was a wide receiver situation back in, 19 or 20 when they got traded for Amari Cooper. And so
2018,
they got to a point. Yeah, exactly. Eventually it got to a point where it was like, yeah, we got to make a move.
Right. Yeah, because it's like, this is not going to work. Okay.
The thing is,
that is the Cowboys way. Go ahead.
They can't afford to wait as late as they did in that year to go get Amari Cooper when it was before week 5, because you look at the front of that schedule, you need to win the time of possession battle in Cleveland. You need to do it week 3 against Baltimore. You need to do it week 8 against San Francisco. I mean, there's teams in there. You really need to wind down the clock and make sure the opposing defenses are staying on the field. I just don't know if they have that guy right now.
Okay, that makes sense. So that's also a good point, because just explain to the fans how they're likely going to, compare to how they've done in previous years, they probably going to move a little faster instead of like waiting until right before the trade deadline or near, because we do have that gauntlet in the first half of the season. So it's like, I don't know if you could really afford to wait and take so many, potential L's because you're not able to play the way that you need to play to be able to beat these teams. So that's an important nugget in what you
said. And I'm going to cut you off, Star, but kind of on the same side of things with the defensive tackle position, we also cannot wait this long. I mean, like you said, last year they waited till week 8 to get Hankins. You know what I'm saying? So to bring in someone that late, they're talking about potentially bringing someone in late for training camp. But like you guys just mentioned, like we don't want them to be reactive again. We want them to get these guys in here if you are going to bring someone in, so that way they can get accustomed to the team, accustomed to the scheme, and that way on both sides of the ball, being able to stop the run and be able to get the run game going.
Yeah, and I think there might be an ace up the sleeve as far as defensive tackle goes. You mentioned wanting to bring in a guy so that he can get up to speed with the scheme. You look at a guy like Linval Joseph, who already knows the scheme and is he's definitely on the back half of his career. He's pushing age 35. Yeah. I mean, he's a guy who knows the Mike Zimmer scheme almost as well as Eric Kendricks does. I wouldn't say to the level of Kendricks, because Kendricks has been the green dot for Zimmer's defenses for a long time. But Joseph is a guy that's comfortable in the system. He understands the expectations. So you look at a guy like him, and you look at some of the other defensive tackle bodies that are out there in free agency. If they don't feel comfortable with what Mozzie Smith puts forward, or with Justin Rogers, Denzel Daxon, what they put forward here at camp as far as at the 1-tech position goes, then that could be a guy that they look at. And then you also look at 3-tech with Osa Odigizua, and you understand, where he's at, and he battled a hamstring injury around OTA's minicamp, and it kind of made you think, okay, if he goes down with an injury at some point in the season, even if it's just for one game, who who's going to fill his spot? You know, who's
your three take? Yeah.
Who's never played an NFL snap? Is it Chauncey Golston, who they haven't been able to figure out where exactly he fits on the defensive line since he arrived? So I think there's a couple of questions that they really need to answer at defensive tackle. And unfortunately, the injury to Sam Williams only makes things a little bit more stressed on that entire defensive line now, because now it makes a holistic picture and a holistic issue that they need to address. But they're trusting in the process with Mozzie Smith, and I'll give it to the coaching staff for, you know, understanding, hey, we did spend a first-round pick on this guy. We trust our personnel department. We're going to get him back up to speed, and we're going to see what the max potential of Mozzie Smith looks like. I do think we get a better Mozzie Smith in 2024 than we did in 2023, but will it be enough? I don't have that answer right now.
Right.
Okay.
I think that's a great point, because like you said, Nick, it's one thing to expect these players to be up to speed, but when you're putting it all on your shoulders. Me and Star were talking about that before we hopped on here. Speaking to Marshawn Neal and them having him take more snaps at the three tech position and at the nose tackle, to put that much pressure, you know, on one individual player and their young player and their rookie coming in trying to stabilize that. So, like you said, just trying to bring in more bodies just to help out these young guys, because they're still getting acclimated to the game. So, I just wish they wouldn't, you know, just leave so much out, you know, leave so much to question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that. And we're going to talk more about the defensive tackles, but I wanted to get into these tight ends. So, with Schoonmaker, and since you can piggyback, I'm just going to press this question. But with Schoonmaker, obviously, it was a complete meltdown when we drafted him last year. You know what I'm saying? There were so many people that, you know, we could have got Tank Dell. We could have got Drew Sanders. You know, everybody was PO'd because we got this kid. Now, of course, when we went back and looked at it, I said that Luke was above an average blocker. Like, one of the things that I saw him do for Luke played for what? Michigan, was it? Yeah. So the thing I saw him do in Michigan, you know, kind of stonewalling. Sometimes it was the defensive ends by itself, defensive tackles. I'm like, this kid can really block. I feel like it's above just, oh, he's a decent blocker for a tight end. But of course, people say when you pick a tight end that high, you're not picking him to just be a blocker. Like, you're picking him because you want him to be able to make plays in the passing game.
Yeah.
And I think he struggled last season. I think a huge part of that was he did miss camp because he was struggling with the plantar fasciitis and stuff like that. So he was kind of behind. But it seems like this year he's taken a step. I know he participated in tight end university, you know, along with Jake Ferguson and Dak Prescott. And so what are you seeing? It seems to me from the clips that he looks a lot more confident. I'm not seeing drives. I'm saying it looks like he looks better, but what do you think about Schoon? Do you think that he's kind of winning this tight end 2 race, or you think somebody is putting a lot of pressure on him?
I wouldn't say there's a ton of pressure right now on Luke as far as the tight end 2 position goes. I think from a receiving perspective, though, and to have opportunities in the receiving game, I'm very curious to see what John Stevens Jr. Does with his opportunities during the preseason, just because he was a guy that said many times he was going to be on the roster last year. And so is he going to push Luke for receiving opportunities? That's a big question. But I think Luke is going to be a very big benefactor of the Mike McCarthy system as far as always having tight ends on the field. And he's a big believer in it. And I think also it's even more important this year, especially on the left side of the offensive line, because you have a rookie left tackle, and being able to put a tight end to the left of Tyler Guyton in the run game, that could really help out the rookie and put a guy like Luke Schoonmaker out there. Even Jake Ferguson, he improved so much last year as a run blocker. And then you also have Brevin Spanford, who is a specialty in run blocking out of the University of Minnesota. So you have these 3 guys that if they are all 3 to make the roster, I mean, they're going to be able to help out Tyler Guyton in a lot of ways in the run game aspect of things. And I think that'll really benefit Schoonmaker as far as not only getting him on the field, but getting him confidence on the field as well. But the tight end room, it's so fascinating, because this time last year, I think going into camp, we were like, gosh, there's a ton of young guys. Surely one of them will have to emerge, but like, where's the depth here? There was a lot of questions. Mm-hmm. And now we jump a year later and it's like, hey, there's a lot of youth here. They feel good. They
look good. I tweeted it. I said, do we have the best tight end room in the league? And I said, I emphasize room because people think like, oh, they're better than Travis Kelce and better than Mark Andrews, that's not what I'm saying.
All
What
that,
I'm saying is, when you look at the totality of the room, if we think Jake Ferguson, how he came on last year, we think he's going to take another step. Then you got these young guys, like you said, John Stevens Jr., Luke Schoonmaker, Brevin Smith-Ford. It's like if these guys, it's like just a room where I feel like it's so full of potential that if these guys are what we think that they are, I mean, you're talking about just like a really nasty, I feel like, tight end room. What you think about that?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I think it could be. It depends on what happens with these opportunities that they're given in the preseason. And I want to see how Stevens bounces back from this injury too. He looks great. He looks like $1 million. He's added 12, 13 pounds, and it's good weight, and he needed it making that transition from receiver to tight end. And I think that's one benefit that he was able to take away from that ACL injury, because that probably would have been a lot more difficult for him to do during a season last year, is add that weight on and do it in a healthy manner. But he did it in a healthy manner. He was able to add upper body mass, and you see that transitioning in the run game as well. I mean, that's going to be the thing that he's going to have to pick up on the most, just because he never did that in college. He was an outside receiver, outside possession guy in the Sun Belt Conference. So he was just basically being tasked with, hey, throw it up, go grab it. And so we'll see what he does with those opportunities. But kind of looping back to Schoonmaker, he's going to have those receiving opportunities. I mean, you think back to the Philadelphia game last year and him having that knee down right at the goal line. I mean, they trusted him at least in that situation. And I wouldn't even say that's Luke's fault. I mean, yes, he needed to know where the goal line was in that instance, but that's a play that could have happened to Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews even. So I think confidence is going to be the biggest thing with Schoonmaker, as well as health.
I know you mentioned receiving opportunities, and we talked about Jake Ferguson taking his step, but something I just been kind of just me personally just kind of wondering, like you said, we have a young room, we have outstanding options as far as a tight end 2 position. So do you see them? We know that they're trying to get all these tight ends opportunities, pass catching opportunities, but do you see them kind of honing in on making maybe one of these tight ends, or maybe a tight end 2, like kind of giving another opportunity, kind of giving them an opportunity for someone to come in and kind of spell Jake Ferguson. You know what I mean? Instead of him trying to take most of the pass catching reps, just someone to try to come in and not necessarily kind of even out the same amount of opportunities, but someone just who can come in and kind of spell Jake Ferguson and take up more of those passing opportunities.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say that. I don't think there's an intentional effort necessarily to do that, but I think just by the dynamics of the room, they're going to have that, because you look at a guy like John Stevens Jr., he can kind of match from a receiving perspective because he can run all the routes that Jake Ferguson can run. Sure, he doesn't have the experience, nor does he have the game reps at the end of the day, but he can run those routes. He can be that seam threat that Dak Prescott would maybe look for if Jake Ferguson is off the field. And then you look at it from a run blocking perspective. I think there's better run blockers in that tight end room than Jake Ferguson. So I think just by the dynamics of the room, they're going to be able to account for what Jake does when/if Jake is off the field, or if it's a 2 tight end set and they want a very similar play on both sides and they want it to be aligned. And I think there's going to be opportunities to do that for sure.
Are you seeing 2 tight end sets where we're sending 2 tight ends on routes? Because you know, we did run a lot of 13, 12 personnel last year, but we did run at a lot of those sets. And so I'm wondering, is Mike and Schottenheimer up to, let's take this to the next level, and let's, people may think, it's a run play, but now we got John Stevens Jr. here, we got Ferg here, we got them both back in the middle of the field. And have you seen any of that so far?
I definitely have. And it's been fun. It's been fun too, because you've seen a 12 personnel with 2 tight ends to the left side and a guy that's off the line, obviously. Princeton Fant, undrafted free agent out of Tennessee a couple of years ago.
I keep forgetting about him.
So it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to see how this tight end room shakes out for sure. I think there's going to be the beauty of it is Coach Linda Wells, Mike McCarthy. They have a lot of bodies in that room, a lot of youth, and a lot of guys ready to step up. I've even seen Hunter Lipke step up and play some tight end as well, and they throw him in some receiving opportunities. That's a new wrinkle that could be added to Hunter Lipke's game. So they're playing with some things at that tight end position. One thing about Mike McCarthy, he's not going to forget about those big bodies on the outside.
Right. And actually, before we move on, I'm glad you mentioned Princeton Fant. They said they had him taking, I think, some halfback snaps in the backfield. Do you see any maturation with that, or is that something like another wrinkle that they're trying out?
I haven't seen that with my own eyes, but it wouldn't surprise me because I saw him do a lot of fullback work during the preseason last year. And if I remember correctly, he was doing that in some practices as well last year. I mean, he has that body type to where he can kind of be that hitchback if they want him to, just because they call him Bull. It's because he looks like a bull. He's like 6'1", 220 pounds. He's just round. And he's very swole. So he can do some things. He can do some things.
He can do some fullback things. Okay, so let's quickly, because I'm like, got you here for an hour, so I'm like, let's transition. So I just want to talk a little bit about wide receiver and offensive line, then we can move into the defense. So it looks to me like Jalen Tolbert has taken another step. Now, in OTAs, I do remember a lot of people saying, I don't know, I'm not hearing a lot about Jalen Tolbert. I'm hearing about Jalen Brooks. And Jalen Brooks has gotten some nice snags too here at camp. But it just looks like Jalen Tolbert and Dak they're just speaking each other's language. Like, and we saw the workout videos. We saw, every seems like throwing session, Jalen Tolbert is there. So how do you think he pretty much got that locked up for like wide receiver 3? Or do you see somebody really pushing him? Like, I don't know, because this guy's also like maybe Tyron Billy. Is that his name? Tyron Billy Johnson.
Yeah.
What do you think about these guys?
Yeah, it's funny because I just had a conversation with somebody while I was watching practice today. It's because this time last year, it felt like around this time we were like, okay, I think Jalen Tolbert's going to be the wide receiver 4. Like I think you see him taking that extra step. You see that confidence there. I think they're going to be comfortable with that. It's almost the same exact mindset, except it's one place above on that depth chart at wide receiver 3. And I don't want that to diminish what Jalen Brooks has done out here either, because Jalen Brooks has been awesome. I've really loved the camp that he's put together. He's gotten more physical. His route running is a lot more crisp. I really like what Jalen Brooks has done. And it's a situation where Jalen Brooks right now is better than what Jalen Tolbert was last year, but so is Jalen Tolbert. And Jalen
Tolbert just took another step. So he almost got me, but I'm sorry, I'm a little bit right.
Yeah, he's really taking that step forward. I think he's going to be a trusted guy for Dak Prescott. I'm starting to see how Jalen Tolbert becomes a trusted target, drive in and drive out for Dak Prescott. Now, that wide receiver 5/6, that's going to be a very fascinating battle. And I love the youth in that room. I think the cream is going to rise to the top. I said it before training camp. I really do believe that, there was a lot of questions about that wide receiver room. And it's like, hey, all they have is CD and Brandon Cooks and nothing behind them. I don't feel that way. I really don't. I think Jalen Tolbert is going to establish himself this year. Jalen Brooks is a young guy who is finding his own, and he's coming into his own. And then you have just a group of guys behind them who are trying to
push it.
They're only elevating each other. You got Tyron Billy Johnson, Kavontae Turpin, who's going to be on the roster, you would think, no matter what, because of the
no matter what.
Hopper has looked really good. And then you also have Ryan Flanoy, who has barely touched the practice field so far because of a knee issue he's dealing with. So there's a lot of guys there, and you have to account for a lot of them. It's unfortunate to some extent, because I was looking at a guy like Cam Johnson, undrafted free agent out of Northwestern today. He's had a really good camp, but it almost feels like it hasn't mattered because there's so many,
so stacked.
So many bodies in that room. So it's going to be tough to find their placement in that room, but I think there's going to be a few receivers on that practice squad who end up being pretty solid for that squad this year.
And actually, just to kind of speak to that point a little bit, not necessarily for the wide receiver, but just kind of in general, me and Star kind of talked about the theme of competition. We talk about with the wide receivers, just being that many guys in that room, but these young guys at the same time getting the opportunity to show what they have and actually getting the looks, because of course we know number one, CeeDee Lamb isn't there, but we just know that a lot of these young guys, not just the wide receivers, but a lot of these young guys are getting the opportunities now. So do you see of course you see the competition amongst the camp, but do you just see a difference in how these guys are working because they know they're going to get the looks, they know they're going to get the actual opportunity? Some of the guys we may not hear about every day, like a Tyron Billy Johnson, where we're starting to hear their names more often now because they're getting more reps. So do you see some of these guys improving this because of the sole sake of competition this year?
I want to give a little bit of context and comparison to that, because this time last year it was Zach Martin that was holding out, and it was guys like TJ Bass and Brock Hoffman that were getting those extra reps. And now you see this that TJ Bass and Brock Hoffman were able to take as a result of that. Yeah. I think the was doing the exact same thing in the absence of CeeDee Lamb. I think it's been a very healthy holdout from a team perspective, Or as far as a wide receiver perspective so far here in camp, because Dak is able to connect with guys that he never would have connected with before.
Right.
I mean, Dak Prescott is throwing completions to Jalen Cropper.
Jalen Cropper, Shy Billy Johnson, the Dirty, Dave Dirt, or whatever.
David Dirt, yeah.
Like, okay, so these guys are getting reps. It's healthy, and I think everyone understands where CeeDee Lamb is at from a business perspective.
Yeah.
Everyone respects that, and whenever he does eventually make his return, it's going to be seamless. I really do believe that.
Yeah. What about shout out to our guy JC Cowboys Network, another great content creator that breaks down film, his amazing film breakdowns. He wants us to ask about Corey Crooms. Have you seen anything with Corey? I haven't heard his name at all. So I don't like what. Yeah. Have you been able to observe him and see how he's looking?
Yeah, the undrafted guy out of Minnesota, he's looked pretty good too. Of the undrafted free agent group at receiver, because there's a lot of them, it's been Cam Johnson and Corey Crooms that have really kind of come together, and they've had a solid camp so far. But I think with those two guys, their goal should be trying to make that practice squad.
Okay. Yeah. So those are more so practice squad focus. Okay, let's switch on, because I got to ask this question. I'm like, some of these questions I gotta delete, but I'm gonna ask this question. Have you, because let me tell you something. When we drafted Cooper Beebe, I cried. Okay, let me tell you, because I've been watching Cooper Beebe for two years now. I did not think that we was gonna get him for real. I just didn't think that. I'm like, I don't know why. We just didn't hear much of a connection between the cap. They kept it on hush for a reason, clearly. But so when you have a guy like Cooper Beebe, now he's transitioning to center. We know that he didn't do center in college. He did tackle. He did guard. Yes, he took snaps in practice, and BB did say that as soon as he trained for center all off season and even post. In the pre-draft process, and then he's continuing to work on it. But I've been hearing from people that Brock Hoffman he's winning this battle hands down, not really looking that much of a competition. The couple of clips I see of Cooper is like, oh, he had a bad snap here, and Mozzie may have got the better of him here. So what have you been able to watch that center competition closely? And what are your honest opinions on where Cooper is at? And if you think that Hoffman is above him, how much would you say that he's above him? Like, is this like night and day? Is this I think maybe if he has a lot of good preseason games, he could push him. What do you think?
Yeah, so first 2 day in pads, that center position is one I've been looking at pretty closely. And I can't find a whole lot wrong with Brock Hoffman's game right now, whereas Cooper Beebe is still learning. And I think that this learning period may be a little bit longer than maybe we anticipated. I'm not sure as far as the coaching staff goes. We get to talk to assistant coaches tomorrow, and I'm really interested.
Oh, great! That'd be great.
About Cooper Beebe and see kind of his thought process as far as his development process goes. But man, right now, Brock Hoffman, the work that he put in over the offseason, the mentorship that he has picked up on from Zach Martin, you are really starting to see that on the field. And that's not an indictment on Cooper Beebe. It's really not. It's just a sense of, hey, Brock Hoffman is really taking this seriously. He's taking an extra level of intention and purpose going into this center battle. He's the leader in the clubhouse. And for me right now, I would be surprised if he's not the starting center in week one. But I also wouldn't put it past Cooper Beebe, because he's a guy, knowing his context at Kansas State. I mean, I've talked to many coaches over there in Manhattan and the Little Apple up in Kansas, and they talk about, hey, when he puts his mind to something, he does it. And it comes naturally for him. He comes from a family that just knows ball. He understands the game to a level that other people just don't understand it at. So he's going to find his spot on that line eventually. Where does that come, though? I think that's going to be the bigger question. But you look at it from a sense of, hey, what if Brock Hoffman does end up winning that center position and he locks it down for the entirety of the season? Then you have a guy in Cooper Beebe who is ready to step in, as well as TJ Bass in that interior offensive line, 3 different positions that can be able to come and make some things work if guys need reps off or if an injury happens. You feel really good about the interior depth.
We feel good about
luxury in this league.
Yeah. I think so too. I'm hoping that Cooper can push him, but hey, if Hoffman genuinely wins this battle, then he won. You know what I'm saying? That's just the end of it. He won. And I trust the coaches that they're not going to have anybody on the field that's a liability or anything like that. So if it's what's best for the team for him to be our center, then that's just what it is. And like you said with Cooper Beebe, he's so versatile that we can have him be our swing guard, this season. And maybe if Zach hangs it up, then he transitions into that right guard spot. People have been talking about that. So I'm glad you said that, because I just wanted to hear, personally from you, what do you think about the competition as it's going on? Okay, so let's transition. Go
I
ahead.
just had a quick question as far as O-line. I know we're talking about the competition and things like that. I just want to ask a quick question about, we had Solari last year. We had a lot of, like we talked about, we had a lot of similar faces from last year. What, if you can answer that, what do you think has changed over this past off season that kind of made, a lot of the O linemen kind of start working, especially, because with Zach Martin, this year starting to work with Duke Manyweather. What do you think has changed as far as, going from maybe just a few guys working with the Duke in the offseason to almost our whole line working with them, in this offseason? What do you think has changed for everyone to, want to be on the same page, to want to be able to, work with a similar guy who could teach them these techniques, and then wanting to just be better this year?
Yeah, I applaud Duke because you see all of the products of his system and where they end up going. And not only in the Cowboys organization, he trains a ton of guys in the pre-draft process. I mean, you look at most of the first rounders that came out of this draft class, he was training with all of them almost. And so you see the rewards that those guys are having and the steps forward that his guys are taking whenever they take his program and his regimen seriously. And I think Zach Martin is a big part of that too, because whatever he says in that room, they listen to. If Zach's like, hey, we need to go jump off this cliff right quick, they're like, all right, let's go. I mean, they're going to do it. It's what Zach Martin's word means in that room. So I think him going over there and training alongside Brock Hoffman and then being able to follow that and just taking a different aspect of the offensive line position. It really helps. And then also he does that offensive line camp every year where he brings in a ton of NFL offensive linemen from around the country, does it about early July, and you see the collaboration. You see the intelligence that is radiated off of those interactions, off of those panels. That's a big reason why. And also he's right next door, so it's really easy to make happen.
Right, exactly. I think, it's fantastic because and one guy that we found out, because I'm like, wow, we've, like Mickey said, pretty much our whole offensive line just about is now training with Duke. And I did have a question before we transition to the defense with, and Nick, how are you on time? Because I need to know how fast I need to go. Okay. So with Awesome Richards, from the clips that I've seen, Awesome looks like he made some gains. I'm not saying that he's all world or anything like that, but he looks like he definitely made some gains. Yeah. Looks like he's playing left tackle, left guard, but is he playing the right side as well? Like where have we really been lining him up the most as you've seen?
Yeah, I've mostly been seeing him at left guard, but I've also seen him at left tackle quite a bit as well. Honestly, I would probably say it's about 60-40. I mean, I've seen him at either of those positions quite a bit. They've been playing with him and trying to figure out what best role he suits. I think preseason is going to be really big for him. He did not have a great preseason last year. There was some learning curves for him that he had to take, and so if he can kind of show in year two that he's taken an extra step, I think it could really benefit him. And he's grown a close relationship with Trey Lance. Both of those guys were right next to each other in the locker room last year. And so
that's interesting.
Both of those guys having an opportunity to go into the preseason together, both of them with a big opportunity in front of them, each in their own different rights, I think it could help both of them at the end of the day, but they both have to show up too.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense for sure with Awesome. Okay. Let's transition over to the defense. So we saw the clips of, Tyler Guyton, Stowe, Wally, Micah Parsons.
Yeah.
And so I want to know, like, first of all, Tyler Guyton, he was another controversial pick. Many people are like, he's too raw. He's switching from right to left. This is basically a project. He's not going to get on field. But when we listen to this kid and see how his coaches and everybody's talking about him, about how he works and how he said, literally from the day after he was drafted, he's been training with Duke. He took no vacations and he worked every single day with Duke. It looks like we're seeing it on the field. And I'm not getting it twisted because we're still know that Micah is Micah, period. You know, one of the best defensive players in the league. But how much are you really like buying into, you know, this kid? Because what I'm seeing, it seems like he may be pretty special. But what do you think about Tyler Guyton? Do you think, because we see Chuma still working with the ones, are you thinking that he earns the one spot maybe after a couple of preseason games? Or do you think maybe Chuma starts off as the starter and then what are you thinking about that battle?
I'd be really surprised if Tyler Guyton's not the starting left tackle week 1. I'd be super shocked, but I love what I've seen from Tyler so far. It's been 2 days in pads, and I don't really like to judge too harshly on offensive linemen or defensive linemen until those pads come on. So 2 days in pads, and you love what you've seen in those first 2 days from a pass protection perspective. He has some work to do in the run game. I think that's going to be just getting NFL reps and understanding that a little bit more. That's going to be big for him. And you know, maybe getting your butt whooped a couple of times from Myles Garrett. That could probably, it really could help.
It could help him. Yep. That's
Unfortunately, like that is coming. You know, that light is not at the end of the tunnel for him.
Yeah.
Right.
I think for him, there's going to be ups and downs, and I tried to communicate that as best as I could on Twitter last night because
I saw it.
I see the big day that Tyler Guyton had, and I see it with my own eyes, and I did love it. I loved it for the kid. I loved it for the progression of that offensive line and that left tackle position. But I also saw that in Mobile, Alabama at the Senior Bowl. And then the very next day, we saw those growing pains and that lack of experience kind of show up. So I just want fans to understand that there will be an up and down, only because if you're praising him this high when he is this high, you can't be this low when he is this low. You know, so I the middle ground. I think you'll be all right as far as expectations go from Tyler Guyton in year 1. But I think all in all, and I've said this time and time again, I said it before he was drafted, Tyler Guyton is going to be a guy who gets a 5th-year option as a first-round pick. But I think he's not going to be a guy after the first couple of years you look at as one of the best first-round picks in the draft. But I think 5 years down the line, when he has that 5th-year option, you'll be like, hey, you have to applaud the Cowboys for the development that they did with Tyler Guyton, and you have to applaud what they did as far as, you know, getting him to where he needs to be. And then him falling into a situation in Dallas where he's the guy that's going to be taking over the role for Tyron Smith. I do think it's a perfect situation for him. I would have maybe liked him to maybe sit behind a guy for a year, but I think getting that experience for him sooner rather than later, that'll be huge for him at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. So go ahead. Okay. Yeah. So if we're talking about the DT battle, right? Mozzie struggled last year, but he looks like he's quicker off the ball. In the clips that I've seen of him, yes, I've seen him still have a little bit of struggles. When people criticize him, say he's setting his pads too high, but I've also seen him occupy blocks and these double teams, hold his ground good, let the linebackers flow to the ball. What have you seen with Mozzie? Do you think? And I've also heard good things about Justin Rogers, that he's looked good out there. What are your thoughts on how Mozzie's looking at Justin Rogers? And do you think that Justin Rogers, it could possibly be starting or have a pivotal role in this defense on week 1? I guess by week 1, I don't know.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting one, and it would be maybe a little hypocritical for me to praise Brock Hoffman and the job he's done, and then sit around and do the same exact thing to Mozzie Smith, just because those are the two guys that have been going at it the most. But this with Mozzie, his get off is quicker. That is a fact. He is bigger than where we saw him in OTAs. That is a fact. And I think if he adds 5 to 10 more pounds to his frame, he starts to understand a little bit more as far as run concepts go. Going deeper into the season, then I think he could be better in 2024, but I just don't understand maybe where that line of progression takes him, because I see it coming up. I just don't know if it's going like this or if it's going like this.
Right.
And defensive tackle is a tough position, and I was fortunate enough, honestly, to talk a lot with Jonathan Hankins last year in the locker room, just kind of off to the side, just kind of trying to understand the journey of a defensive tackle, a one-tech in the NFL. And he said, he's like, look, man, I'm not trying to like help Mozzie here. Like I would like to help my teammate. I'm just being honest. A defensive tackle coming into the league, there is a lot of growing pains, and there's a lot of things you have to learn and understand, more so than any position. But once you get it down, you get it down. And that's why you see guys like Jonathan Hankins and Linval Joseph and eventually a guy like Chris Jones. They're going to be able to stay in the league for a really long time because once you have those things down, once you have those run concepts down, it's really easy to figure out what happens in the middle of that offensive line and anticipate what guys across the line of scrimmage from you will do. I think with Mazi, though, it's just going to be soaking up as much knowledge as possible and trying to apply it as quickly as possible. And it's the same thing with Rodgers, too. I mean, he has more college experience than Mazi did coming out, but it's SEC experience too. But he's not as tall. He's a little bit more wide, so he'll be able to fill running lanes a little bit more. But I think Mazi, when he's at his best, he's quicker and he's more athletic.
Okay. So it sounds like with Mazi, we just gotta see. He's trending up. We just don't know how far he's trending up. And basically, do you think we play Mazi at preseason?
Absolutely, he needs to get.
We got to get him as much reps as possible to see
100%.
Basically how he adjusts. But I do like to see that we just want Mazi we want the best for him. We just want him to get better. You know what I'm saying? Whatever that better looks like, as long as he just continues to stack those good days. What about Junior Fehoko?
Yeah.
Have you because we've seen that there's three guys that we're kind of using as tweeners, what I call where they are putting them inside outside. Junior Fehoko, Marshawn Nealon, and Chauncey Golston. Now these three guys, are we putting them inside because they really can play these? They can play both, and schematically we're just trying to see different fronts and schemes of how we can get these guys on the field, or are we using these guys in these positions because we don't have enough DTs?
I think it's a combination of a couple of things happening with that. I think there's some holdover from the Dan Quinn ideology.
Nick, you froze on us.
Oh man, hey, he was cooking.
I know. Nick, can you hear us? If you can hear us, you can go out and come back in.
Man, he froze right up.
I know, he froze right up. I don't know what happened.
Man.
The Wi-Fi monsters got him. No. Okay, he's going to come.
Yeah, he's going to come back in. We deep into it, guys, and we still going. You know what I'm saying? Make sure you guys hit that like button, hit the share button, subscribe. We really cooking tonight, y'all. Shout out to Nick Harris. He'll be back here in just a second, but he's really giving us some great information. Players that we don't even hear about all the time. Like she just said, Fehoko. Like, when was the last time we heard about Fehoko, y'all? Since last year. I mean, we barely even see clips of him. So, and especially with Sam Williams going down with the injury, and just the questions that we have on the defensive line now with this, that are now enhanced with the injury. It's just unfortunate, but also fortunate that we now be able to see some of these young guys.
Exactly, and we did have shout out to Patrick No C. He did confirm. Oh, there goes Nick. All right, Nick's back. Okay, thank God. I was like, oh no, the Wi-Fi monster got him. Okay, you were talking. Okay, so we were talking about the three guys that we've been playing inside and outside, and kind of like, are we playing them there because they can really play these positions schematically, or are we playing them there because we don't really have enough DTs? That was my question.
Yeah, it's a combination of two things. It's a holdover from the Dan Quinn ideology of having as many athletic pass rushers as you can have at the front of the defensive line. And he stood on the table for a guy like Viliami Fehoko to get drafted in the 4th round last year because he saw the athleticism that he could bring as a big body type guy. And then you also have, I think there's also a sense of, hey, we need to find our backup 3 tech too. So I think it's a combination of both of those things. Which it's interesting because Marshawn Nealon was drafted obviously after Dan Quinn had already departed, and you look at what he brings, and he brings run game knacks. And if they wanted to get better in the run game, that was a guy that they were able to draft and do that with. And he's a guy that I call him a piano player. He can move up and down the keys, and I think he can be just fine anywhere he wants to be. I think, though, eventually, kind of where his career will eventually take him, in my eyes, is whenever DeMarcus Lawrence decides to hang it up, he's going to be the perfect replacement to be able to fill what Lawrence has brought to the Dallas Cowboys over the course of his career, because both of those guys are super strong in the run game. They're super strong as humans, and they're bigger type edge rushers. And I think it's an interesting combination that the Cowboys will have going forward with those two.
Okay. And then what about, Chauncey? He's been a guy where in the few snaps that he has, it seems like Chauncey's pretty good at stopping the run. We always thought that he was a traditional like 4-3 defensive end, but he's never under, well, at least under Dan Quinn's scheme, he did not really play that position. So, are you seeing this as a guy where schematically, basically, I'm asking, do you think he may be on the fringe of, I don't know if he's going to make the roster? Because when you've got guys like you said, Vladimir Fehoko, he's younger, he's bigger, what do you think about Chauncey Golston?
Yeah, he's an interesting case. I would have to consider him on the bubble just because I don't think he hasn't found his role on this defense over the course of the last couple of years. And, with so much happening in free agency over the offseason, a couple of bodies leaving the defensive line room, and now the Sam Williams injury happening as well. If he can't find a role this year, in a year where depth is very much needed in that Cowboys defensive line room, then I assume that they're going to have to look for that depth elsewhere. Now, I did see Golston beat Tyler Smith on a rep a couple of days ago. It was the first day in I was like, man, that was pretty good. And then the very next rep, Tyler Smith got him right back. So
right.
I think with him, he's going to have to find his role and just stick to it. That's going to be really big for Chauncey Golston.
Have they, just to kind of piggyback on that question, have they had Golston gain any weight? Have they put any weight on Golston as well to kind of get him ready for that position?
Not to my knowledge. It looks about the same as it was last year, but also this is kind of the same responsibility he was being asked of last year as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so we're nearing the end, Nick, I promise. Just some last questions about these linebackers. So, to me, the linebackers seem like they're just, and what's up to everybody in the chat? Carl, JV, Peasy. Glad to see all of you guys here supporting us. Y'all know to like and share and subscribe. Please help us out. But with the linebackers, it's seeming like they're on a different, like players like Damone, like just on a different level of confidence. Last year, Damone really, and when he spoke about it, he said, we didn't have any veteran leadership. We didn't really know when LVE went down. We didn't know what was going on. Like pretty much, like just to be honest, we didn't know what we were doing. But now you see him hitting the holes. You see him more confident, kind of like he was his rookie year when he only played like half the season. So, and then you see guys like Overshown, which is a heat-seeking missile, where we know he got bigger and he looks good. Then we added our rookie Maris. Maris was another one of my pick cats, which I have not heard a lot about. So, what are your thoughts on the linebacker room? Do you think we got stronger there from having Eric Kendricks or EK, like they say? And what have you seen about, from my guy Maris? Because he was tearing up. It seemed like he was tearing up OTAs, but he's kind of gone quiet, I guess, for training camp, or just people aren't really talking about him. So what are your thoughts on the linebacker core?
Yeah, no doubt from the time that they walked off the field against Green Bay, what was that, 6 months ago to now, that linebacker room it's been way benefited.
Yeah.
I mean, you had a veteran in Eric Kendricks who knows this system like the back of his hand, and he's kind of the bridge between Mike Zimmer and the personnel that's on the field at any given time. I mean, you're going to have Mike Zimmer down on the field this year, not up in the box, but still, he's a guy that is on the field wearing the green dot, understanding the system like the back of his hand because he's known it his entire NFL career. He's going to be so huge for the entire defense, not only that linebacker room, but focusing in on that linebacker room. He's going to be able to help all those guys grow too. I mean, other than Eric Kendricks, it's an influx of youth there. Damone Clark is only going into his third season. It feels like he's been around a little bit longer. And then you have DeMarvion Overshown, Maris Luafau, Jason Johnson, Brock Mogensen, all these young guys. It's the bodies. And I think the bodies are going to be able to really help out the entire room at the end of the day. And the Damone Clark situation, it was really difficult for him, I think, last year. I don't think he would tell you that, but just from my outside perspective looking in and understanding that linebacker room and the dynamics and what he was being tasked to do. I mean, you go back and look at a game like Buffalo. He had such a rough game because he was being asked to do so many different things at once, and it eventually got to a point to where he broke. And I think it was tough on that linebacker room to only have one true healthy linebacker at the end of the season. Marquise Bell did what he could, and you have to applaud him.
He did the best he could.
He did the best he could, and you have to applaud him because he did it. He did a fine effort, but at the end of the day, he was a safety. And so you saw Aaron Jones just attack that second level. You saw a Cook last year for the James
Cooks.
Buffalo Bills, just attack that second level. I mean,
Yep.
teams are trying over and over again. And so I think with Damone Clark, he's now allowed to be a little bit more free. He doesn't have as many responsibilities on his plate as he did last year. He's able to be Damone Clark again. And then you look at DeMarvion Overshone and Maris Lewifau, they're just two bats that are coming out of hell. Those guys are going to be a lot of fun. Maris Lewifau is going to be an interesting perspective. You ask kind of like what he's done so far at camp. He's going to be a guy that I think is a third down specialty type player because I think on certain instances on third down, maybe like a third and medium type situation or third and short type situation, he's going to be able to control the middle of the field because he has the background of being a defensive back. And so he understands what's going on in those zone coverages across the middle of the field. Or if he needs to man up with a tight end, he can do that. But also, he has an ace up his sleeve from a blitz package perspective where Notre Dame at times last year, 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, hey, Marist, act like you're going to drop back in coverage and beeline for that quarterback. And he gets after him.
He gets after him.
Right. If he doesn't hit him, then he's at least able to affect the play. And so I think that's a really fun aspect of the Mike Zimmer defense is how he uses Maris Lewifau in those situations. I guarantee you, time it happens, if you can find a camera that's panning up to the press box, you'll see me go like, hey, you remember all that?
Absolutely. Right. Hell yeah.
And to your point, Nick, about having one healthy linebacker, not just one healthy linebacker, but we really only had one true veteran linebacker in LVE in that room. So when he went down early in the season, like you said, for that much responsibility to be placed on Damone Clark's shoulders and to have no one really to look to for help of what to do in these situations, because you're really dealing with it at that speed. You're in game speed because you're in season. So I'm glad that the Cowboys decided to bring in guys like you said, like bringing in Kendricks, even bringing in Damian Wilson, and even bringing in other vets in that room. It's just good that these young guys will have somebody to turn to if they do have questions, not just be able to have it to rely on the coach, like that you can't get in these short meetings. They actually be able to have vets in the room that they can turn to.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think a guy that maybe keep an eye on that could potentially make the roster is Buddy Johnson. He was a guy that was added.
I've been hearing his name a lot, Buddy Johnson.
Would not be surprised if he ends up finding a 53 spot because of his special teams work. He's done a really good job there. And he's looked really good in that linebacking core too. He looks natural there. So I think he's a guy that can maybe squeak in too.
And he's another guy that was in the system just last year. We're seeing a lot of these guys who were in the system last year seemingly making, I don't know all the years of these guys, but maybe seemingly making second-year jumps. Like we just mentioned, Tyron Billy Johnson, Buddy Johnson, Jalen Moreno Cropper. We see a lot of these guys taking advantage. And me and Star talked about taking these mental reps serious. Like we talked about Luke Schoonmaker. I'm saying kind of upping his confidence a little bit. It's just good to see these guys taking advantage of what they presented with.
Exactly. I agree with that 100%. And that's exciting because linebacker, that was probably our worst position group last year. And I think it just, made it, add, like you said, add in Eric Kendrick, somebody who could stabilize us, just really added so much to our guys, and they just have guidance now. I think Damone even talked about in his interviews, like we have our linebacker dinner. Like he's just like, I feel like I'm being led, because we knew with him it wasn't the talent. It just, if you don't know what's going on up there, you're gonna look a little suspect. But so I'm glad to see those guys like that coming along, and I'm really excited what you said about Maris, like kind of being this like specialty package, like heat-seeking missile. Yeah. And with Zimmer, so let's get the last thing we have is just talking about a little bit about the secondary. The secondary seems like they've been going off. I don't know if Zimmer is or Al Harris is putting something in their drink. I'm just playing NFL. I don't think we're juicing them or anything, but they just been going. I mean, just picks left and right. I'm like, what is going on? Even the linebackers, we saw Eric Kendricks working with Al Harris. And then today, I think it was Willie Harvey Jr. He has 2 picks so far, the UFL guy. So I'm like, okay, like it looks like so what have you seen? Because Zimmer, he's known for like these exotic fronts, and he's changing the picture, from post-snap to pre-snap. I mean, from, pre-snap to post-snap and things like that. So what are you seeing with like Zimmer's fronts? So I got a couple of questions. So the Zimmer's fronts I want to know about. I also want to know, is Bland, is he getting any inside work? Because I heard Kalen Carson's just working on the outside. So who is I want to know, is anybody challenging J. Lou? J. Lou's been going off, so this is not J. Lou needs challenging. But I'm just saying, who have they been putting behind J. Lou in that slot spot? Izzy McQuamu had a crazy day today, which I've been high on Izzy ever since we saw him kind of break out in that playoff game versus the Bucks in 2022, and then we kind of didn't really see him much. So, what are your thoughts about this secondary? Who is standing out to you? A blinking light. Somebody else said like Amani Johnson. I know that was a guy you like. Julius Wood. Yeah. Is another guy. Like we have so many. We went from a team that didn't really value safety to having like 100 safeties. So I just wanted to what are your thoughts on the safety room, cornerback room, and just to close it out?
Yeah, for the Deron Bland perspective, he's been getting outside work. I think they are perfectly fine now with letting him be that outside corner opposite of Trayvon.
Okay, so he's outside. So Cowboys fans, stop saying he bitter in the slot because he ain't going in there. All right.
Yeah, I mean, I can maybe see it as a situation where maybe he gets some more inside work if there's an injury to Jordan Lewis, and maybe they have to move some things around. But as far as what you'll see week one, it's going to be Trayvon Diggs and Deron Bland on the outside and Jordan Lewis at the slot. I feel pretty confident in that. And as far as Kalen Carson goes, I think he is starting to be the established CB4. He looks really, really good.
He looks really good out there. That mirror ability, those hips, I was like...
Fluid change of direction. He's physical. I think that helps both inside and outside. You ask about reps. I would say 80% of the reps I've seen with my own eyes have been on the outside, but I have seen him get some work inside as well.
Okay, so he has got some inside work. Okay.
Yeah, more so in one-on-one action. I haven't seen him take any inside reps in 11-on-11 or 7-on-7, I believe. But definitely in some one-on-one sessions. And then Israel McQuamu, I've seen him just kind of being thrown around that secondary.
Yeah, what is he playing, Nick? Is he playing corner? Is he playing safety? What is he doing?
The answer is yes. He's playing it all.
He's playing everywhere. Okay, so they making him like a Swift Army knife. Like we just try you everywhere. Okay.
Yeah. And he's done a really good job so far as well. He had a really good day of camp today. I think for him it's going to be just picking up that Zimmer system. If he can get comfortable in the system, then he'll find a way onto the field for sure. But I think with the secondary as a whole, you have Al Harris there. You have the elevation of Cannon Matthews, who is kind of an Al Harris disciple.
Cannon Matthews. I forgot about him. Coach Matthews.
Tomorrow too. So really excited to see how he's been able to kind of add his perspective to the room. But there's a lot of trust into what that secondary is doing right now, as it should be. You look at that defense, that is the one group where I don't think you're going to have many concerns unless injuries kind of derail some things. That's going to be a really, really strong group going into the season. It's going to be a lot of fun for Mike Zimmer and kind of how he uses those corners.
Y'all heard what Nick Harris said. What'd you say? They're going to be a what kind of group?
They're going to be an awesome group. I'll say that for sure. I forgot what I said earlier, but they're going to be an awesome group. I think for them that you talk about Bland and Diggs being that duo and then being able to hone in together. That's going to be a lot of fun for them, especially once Diggs gets his feet back under him and is really confident on the field. I see the comment about please no Trayvon Diggs week one. I think he'll be fine by week one. I really do. They're slowly integrating.
That's going to be my next question. I'm like, do you think Trey starts week one?
Okay. Yeah, I think they slowly integrate him back onto the field out here at training camp, and they get him ready for week one because by then it's a full year. And you saw, I think when fans look at Terrence Steele, maybe came back a little bit too early. Fans look at Michael Gallup, maybe came back
too early.
The time that Trayvon Diggs has had. Trayvon Diggs has had the time. He really has. And I think integrating him slowly over the course of training camp, that's what this time is for. I think he'll be ready by week one. Will it take him 3 or 4 games to return to form? Absolutely. I think so. But I think he needs those 3 or 4 games sooner rather than later.
Okay, so you definitely think, unless there's some type of setback, he should be starting. And you said that as far as the cornerback 4, you're saying right now, it's seeming like Kalen Carson is pretty much a lock. That would mean that guys like Eric Scott Jr. and Nashawn Wright, they're not really putting much pressure on him. Would that be fair? Okay.
I really like what I've seen from Kalen Carson. I really do.
Nick crazy. He said no.
I think when you look at Nashawn Wright, you look at Eric Scott Jr., even Israel McQuamu in a sense, those guys are fighting for roster spots right now.
Okay. So in Wanye, I didn't ask you about him. Wanye, is Wanye a lock pretty much? You think so?
Yeah, he's going to have to be because of his special teams, right? You look at what he
You
brings
right.
from a special teams perspective, and
Yeah.
whenever he rotates onto the field, he doesn't make many mistakes. And if he does, he doesn't make the same mistake twice. He's a guy you got to figure out where to make it work for him to be on the 53-man roster, and you figure out his role after, because he's a guy who he's a locker room presence, he's an on-field presence. You want to have Wanye Thomas on your team.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's give claps. Let's give claps for Nick, because this was awesome.
Yes.
I think he gave us so much knowledge. He gave us so much just insight on these players, because a lot of these players, some of you haven't seen, some of you haven't even heard about. So just to get an idea of where these players playing and what they're doing. I think I'll ask one final question. I will let you go, Nick, about Micah. It seems like Micah, he's playing, of course we see him on the edge, but we see him, like he said, he's going to be a chess piece. You know, Mickey, you had a question about that, didn't you? About Micah being a chess piece?
Yeah, I did. Sorry about that. I had to take a quick phone call. But yeah, we heard Mike McCarthy mention in a press conference. He had several this week, but I think earlier this week he mentioned about Zimmer using Micah as "quote unquote" a chess piece and making it difficult for the offensive line. You know, and just he had Tyron Smith there before the battle. For the previous years in training camp. So just being able to better Guyton's game and even challenge the rest of the players on that side. Do you see a difference in the defense? Do you see maybe an improvement in the offensive line just because they have, someone to go against? Like we talk about Guyton having to face, the Browns week 1. So do you see just a difference in the offensive line just because they have guys to go against like D-Law, like Micah?
Absolutely, and that's evergreen. That's year in, year out. And we talked a lot about that last year with the talent that was around the group. You had Tyron Smith in the building. You had a guy like Dorrance Armstrong and Dante Fowler as well. I mean, there was a lot of competition there in those trenches, and I feel like they both elevated each other in both of their own respective rights. But not to say that's not present this year. That's still very much the case. As far as Micah being a chess piece, you saw it a lot last year too. You saw him lining up over center at times, playing some zero tech and kind of isolating the center, and him being able to use his athleticism to get around the middle of that offensive line. You're going to see him move around quite a bit as well. I think you're going to see him play some more off-ball linebacker too than we got used to seeing him play last year. Don't quote me on this. I believe his percentages last year were about 85% off the ball, 85% on the ball, 15% off the ball. This is just me theorizing. I think that's going to be closer to probably 70-30 this year, just because of the alignments that we've seen Micah Parsons playing in some off-ball situations. So I think you might get used to seeing a little bit more of Penn State Micah Parsons, but also a lot of Dallas Cowboys Micah Parsons as well.
Micah Parsons, okay. And just with Zimmer changing these fronts, I said it today. It's my last thing I'm going to say. I'm like, I think this defense is just going to make Dak had an amazing season last year, but it just seems like this defense, because of Zimmer is known to be this guy that, he changes the picture and all of this type of stuff. And that's been one thing that people have criticized Dak about. Like, he's great pre-snap, but sometimes things can kind of get him post-snap. You think this is the way this defensive front and how Zimmer is mixing and all this stuff, that this is going to make Dak sharper? You know what I'm saying? Just better is seeing things pre and post-snap.
Yeah, absolutely. He's gotten used to seeing the same system for the most part over the course of the last 3 seasons.
3 years, yeah.
And now it's a different system that's being thrown at him every single day in practice. And I used to seeing a lot of man coverage day in and day out last year, of course, the last 3 seasons. And as time went on, he got better and better at throwing against zone coverage. But he's starting to see more of those looks now in training camp. And so, of course, that's only going to help him. Competition only helps both of those rooms rise.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we can wrap on that. Nick, is there anything, any last words that you would like to say before letting out? I know you can tell people. Some people were like, does Nick have a YouTube channel or anything like that? So you can plug your socials or let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, I appreciate you ladies having me on. Y'all do a great job. Y'all grind, and I respect that. So I wanted to make sure and hop on here for sure for you guys. But for me, a Cowboys Break is the podcast that I'm on this year on DallasCowboys.com.
Right.
Cowboys YouTube. So be sure and go and check that out. We have a show every other weekday out here at training camp, and then once the season starts, it'll be every weekday. So Be sure and go check that out. We already got a couple episodes up from training camp. We'll have another one up in the morning. And then as far as me goes, yeah, just keep locked in with Dallas Cowboys YouTube. I'm putting up a lot of content there throughout the year. Going to start doing some more stuff on there too. So yeah, be sure and stay locked in there. And then Nick Harris DC on Twitter.
Exactly. Nick Harris, DC. Y'all follow him for all the Dallas Cowboys content. Thank you guys so much for rocking with us. Thank you again to our special guest, Nick. Got so much information from here. This was great. We definitely want to do this again. Maybe we can have you on again, well, mid-season or something like that. But thank you so much, guys in the chat. Stephen White, you came in late. Thank you so much. Please like and share and subscribe. And until next time, Mickey, do you have any final words for you? Do the outro?
No, everything you said, I co-sign everything you said. Nick Harris, thank you so much for coming on with us. We really do appreciate you. Like Star says, not every day we get to come in contact with beat writers or just even just people embedded in the Cowboys organization. So like she said, for you to spend your time with us, a weekday, because it's busy. You guys, still have a schedule going for the rest of the week. So yes, thank you for your time, and thank you to everyone spending their time in here with us, chatting it up with Mr. Nick Harris. And like Star said, we hope to have you back.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you. See you guys.